The sun beat down on the small town of Pine Ridge as Jack Reynolds wiped sweat from his forehead. The summer heat was intense, but Jack didn't mind. After 15 years as a Navy SEAL, he had endured far worse conditions than a hot day in Montana. 2 years into civilian life, he was still adjusting to the quiet rhythm of small-town America. "You want another iced tea?" asked Beth, sliding into the booth across from him at Molly's diner. Her smile still made his heart skip a beat, even after 12 years of marriage. "I'm good," Jack replied, glancing around the nearly empty diner. Most folks were probably at the lake on a scorching day like this. "How's the new job going?" Beth launched into a story about her work at the local veterinary clinic. Jack listened, nodding at all the right moments. This was what he had dreamed about during those long nights in foreign countries. Simple conversations in a safe place with the woman he loved. The bell above the diner door jingled, cutting through Beth's story. Jack's instincts kicked in before he consciously registered the noise. A quick assessment of the newcomers, their posture, their intentions. Old habits. 5 men walked in, their heavy boots thudding against the worn linoleum floor. They wore leather vests decorated with patches, a skull wrapped in chains with the words "Iron Fist" curved above it. The tallest one, sporting a thick beard streaked with gray, scanned the diner with cold eyes. He spotted Jack and Beth and whispered something to his companions. They laughed. "Don't stare," Jack said quietly to Beth, who had turned to look. "Just keep talking." But the bikers weren't content to be ignored. They crowded around the counter, ordering coffee in loud voices and making crude comments that made Molly, the 60-year-old owner, press her lips together in a tight line. Jack kept his focus on Beth. Though his awareness remained on the men at the counter, he caught fragments of their conversation, something about a shipment coming in and teaching a lesson to someone named Cooper. The bearded leader drained his coffee cup and slammed it down. "Let's roll out," he barked to his crew. As they headed for the door, the shortest one, a wiry man with a snake tattoo crawling up his neck, deliberately bumped into their table, sending Beth's water glass tumbling into her lap. "Oh." Beth jumped up as cold water soaked her jeans. "Watch where you're sitting, lady," Snake Tattoo sneered. Jack stood slowly. "She wasn't in your way," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You might want to apologize." The diner went quiet. Molly froze behind the counter, coffee pot suspended mid-pour. Snake Tattoo's eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" "I said," Jack repeated evenly, "you might want to apologize to my wife." The bearded leader stepped forward. "You got a problem with my friend here?" "No problem," Jack replied. "Just asking for some basic courtesy." The leader looked Jack up and down, taking in his plain t-shirt and faded jeans. Nothing about Jack's appearance suggested he was anything other than an ordinary guy in his early 40s. Nothing visible hinted at the years of elite military training or the combat experiences that had forged him into something far different than what these men perceived. "You hear that, boys?" The leader chuckled. "This fellow wants courtesy." He leaned closer to Jack. "We don't do courtesy. We do whatever we want in this town. Best you remember that." Jack held his gaze without flinching. He could feel the familiar coolness settling over him, the calm that always preceded action. But this wasn't a battlefield. This was a diner in his adopted hometown, and Beth was right beside him. "Let it go," Beth whispered, placing a hand on his arm. "It's not worth it." After a long moment, Jack nodded once and sat down. The leader grinned, showing yellowed teeth. "Smart move," he said. "Come on, boys." As they turned to leave, Snake Tattoo deliberately knocked Jack's shoulder. Jack didn't react, just watched as they sauntered out the door and mounted their motorcycles. The roar of engines filled the street, then faded as they rode away. "I'm so sorry about that." Molly hurried over with a stack of napkins for Beth. "Those men, they've been trouble since they showed up 3 months ago." "Who are they?" Jack asked, helping Beth mop up the spilled water. "They call themselves the Iron Fist," Molly said, lowering her voice even though the diner was empty, except for an elderly man reading a newspaper in the corner. "They bought that old warehouse at the edge of town. People say they're running drugs, but nobody can prove anything. Sheriff Willis won't touch them." "Why not?" Beth asked. Molly shrugged. "Some say he's scared. Others think they're paying him to look the other way." Jack frowned. This wasn't what he and Beth had signed up for when they moved to Pine Ridge. After his retirement from the SEALs, They had chosen this town specifically for its safety record and tight-knit community feel. They've been pushing folks around, Molly continued, refilling their cups. Bobby Cooper refused to sell them his repair shop. That's the only garage for 30 miles. Next day, his place got vandalized. Windows smashed, tools stolen. Did he report it? Jack asked. Sure did. Sheriff took a report and nothing else happened. Molly sighed. Bobby's thinking of selling now. Says it's not worth the trouble. Beth reached across the table and squeezed Jack's hand. She knew that look in his eyes. The one that said he'd found a problem that needed solving. We're just passing through, Jack said to Molly, the lie coming easily. No need to worry about us. After paying their bill, Jack held the door for Beth as they stepped into the blazing afternoon sun. Their truck was parked across the street, and Jack scanned the area before crossing. Another old habit that had kept him alive. You're thinking about those bikers, Beth said as they drove home. It wasn't a question. Just wondering why the sheriff isn't doing his job, Jack replied. Beth turned to look at him. Jack, we came here for a quiet life. Remember? He nodded. I remember. But they both knew that Jack Reynolds wasn't built to ignore injustice. His SEAL teammates used to joke that he had a hero complex, but it was more basic than that. Jack simply couldn't stand by while bullies pushed good people around. Their house sat on 3 acres just outside town, a modest rancher with a big workshop where Jack had been building furniture as a hobby. As they pulled into the driveway, he noticed tire tracks that hadn't been there that morning. Motorcycle tracks cutting across their front lawn. Stay in the truck, he told Beth, his voice shifting to the command tone she recognized from crisis moments in their past. Jack approached the house cautiously, noting that the front door was still locked. The windows were intact. Nothing seemed disturbed. But when he rounded the corner to check the workshop, he found the message they'd left for him. Someone had spray-painted, "Mind your business," in red letters across the workshop door. He took a photo with his phone before returning to the truck where Beth waited. Anxiously, "Everything okay?" she asked. "Fine," he said, not wanting to worry her yet. Just checking something in the workshop. That evening, after Beth had gone to bed, Jack sat at their kitchen table cleaning his old service pistol, a habit that helped him think. The Iron Fist gang had found his home within hours of the diner encounter. They knew where he lived. They were sending a message. He thought about his options. He could report the vandalism to the apparently corrupt sheriff. He could ignore it and hope they'd leave him alone. He could move, pack up Beth, and find another quiet town. Or he could do what he'd been trained to do, assess the threat and neutralize it. Jack's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You should have kept your mouth shut today. Iron Fist doesn't forgive." He stared at the message, feeling not fear but a familiar clarity. These men had made a serious miscalculation. They thought they'd found an easy target, just another civilian to intimidate. They had no idea what Jack Reynolds had done for his country, or what he was capable of doing to protect his home. Jack finished cleaning his pistol and put it away. Tomorrow he would begin gathering information about the Iron Fist gang. He would learn their routines, their weaknesses, their operations. And then he would decide how to proceed. The Navy had trained him not just to fight but to plan, to be patient, to strike only when the time was right. Jack Reynolds wasn't looking for revenge for a spilled glass of water or some spray paint. But if these men were terrorizing his new hometown, they were about to learn a hard lesson about messing with the wrong man. Jack woke before sunrise the next morning, his body still operating on military time despite 2 years of civilian life. He slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Beth, and headed to the kitchen to brew coffee. Through the window he could see the workshop with its spray-painted message, a red slash against the white door. The coffee maker gurgled as Jack opened his laptop. His first step was simple research, learning everything he could about the Iron Fist gang. A quick search pulled up several local news articles about motorcycle club activities in neighboring counties, but nothing specific about this group. "You're up early," Beth said, padding into the kitchen in slippers. She kissed his cheek before pouring herself coffee. "Couldn't sleep," Jack admitted. Beth glanced at his laptop screen. "What are you doing?" Jack hesitated, then turned the screen so she could see. "There's something I need to show you." He led her outside to the workshop. Beth's hand flew to her mouth when she saw the graffiti. "The bikers from yesterday?" Jack nodded. "They also left tire tracks across the lawn. And I got this last night. He showed her the threatening text message. We need to call the sheriff, Beth said immediately. According to Molly, the sheriff might be in their pocket. Jack ran a hand through his short hair. But you're right. We need to do this by the book first. An hour later, they sat in Sheriff Willis's office. The sheriff was a heavy-set man with thinning hair and bloodshot eyes. He jotted a few notes as they explained about the diner confrontation and the vandalism. So you got on the wrong side of the Iron Fist, boys, Willis said, leaning back in his chair. Not smart. I'm not the one who broke the law, Jack pointed out. The sheriff shrugged. Spray paint washes off. No real harm done. They threatened my wife, Jack said, his voice hardening slightly. They trespassed on my property. Look, Mr. Reynolds, Willis sighed. I understand you're upset, but these are serious guys with connections. My advice? Clean up the paint, stay out of their way, and this will all blow over. Beth squeezed Jack's hand, a silent request for him to stay calm. Will you at least take a report? Jack asked. Sure, Willis said, though his tone suggested the paperwork would find its way to the bottom of a very deep pile. I'll send a deputy out to take some pictures. As they left the sheriff's office, Jack's suspicions were confirmed. Law enforcement in Pine Ridge wasn't going to help. They were on their own. What now? Beth asked as they drove home. Now we take precautions, Jack replied, and I learn more about what we're dealing with. Over the next 2 days, Jack installed security cameras around their property and added new deadbolts to the doors. He bought Beth a can of pepper spray and made her promise to keep it with her. Then he began his reconnaissance. The old warehouse at the edge of town wasn't hard to find. Jack parked his truck a quarter-mile away and approached on foot, moving through the trees that bordered the property. From his vantage point in the woods, he could see 6 motorcycles parked outside and a few pickup trucks. Men moved in and out of the building carrying boxes. A guard with a shotgun stood by the main entrance. This wasn't just a clubhouse. This was an operation. Jack spent 3 hours observing, taking photos with a telephoto lens. He identified the bearded leader. The others called him Hawk, and the snake-tattooed man who had bumped into Beth, whose name appeared to be Viper. There were about 15 members in total, plus a few women who seemed to be girlfriends or hangers-on. On his way back to his truck, Jack ran into Bobby Cooper, the garage owner Molly had mentioned. Bobby was fixing a flat tire on his pickup by the side of the road. Need a hand? Jack asked, stopping to help. Thanks, Bobby said. He was a sturdy man in his 50s with grease-stained hands and tired eyes. You're new in town, right? Jack something? Jack Reynolds, he confirmed, helping Bobby position the jack under the truck. I heard you've had some trouble with the Iron Fist gang. Bobby's face darkened. Who told you that? Molly at the diner. I had a run-in with them myself. Bobby glanced around nervously. Look, no offense, but I don't want to talk about those guys. They've made it clear what happens to people who cross them. What happened exactly? Jack pressed gently. Bobby tightened the lug nuts on his spare tire before answering. They wanted to buy my garage. Offered half what it's worth. I said no. He stood up, wiping his hands on a rag. That night they broke in, smashed everything they could, left a message saying next time it would be my house with me inside. And the sheriff? Bobby laughed bitterly. Willis. He took a report and said there wasn't enough evidence. 2 days later, I saw him having drinks with Hawk at the roadhouse. He shook his head. I'm selling the garage. 30 years of work and I'm walking away. But I've got grandkids to think about. Jack helped him put the tools away. How many other businesses have they approached? Most of Main Street, Bobby said. They call it protection money, but everyone knows what it really is. The hardware store, the pharmacy, even Molly's. Pay up or face consequences. Has anyone stood up to them? Pete Wilson at the hardware store refused last week, Bobby said. Word is they're planning something for him soon. He closed his toolbox. My advice? Do what the sheriff said. Stay out of it. These aren't just thugs, they're organized. Dangerous. Jack nodded thoughtfully. Thanks for the warning. That evening, Jack drove to the hardware store. Pete Wilson was just closing up. Mr. Wilson, Jack called. Got a minute? The hardware store owner was a lean, weathered man with a salt and pepper beard. Store's closed, he said gruffly. I'm not here to shop, Jack explained. I heard you might be having trouble with the Iron Fist gang. Pete's expression hardened. Who are you? Someone who's had his own problems with them. I thought maybe we could help each other. Pete studied him for a long moment, then jerked his head toward the door. Come inside. Once in the store, Pete locked the door behind them. My wife thinks I should pay them, he said, leading Jack to a small office in the back. Maybe she's right. But this store's been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather didn't bow to the mob in the 50s, and I'm not bowing to these punks now. What have they threatened? Jack asked. First it was just talk. Nice store, shame if something happened to it. Then they got specific, fire specifically. Pete opened a drawer and pulled out a note. Got this yesterday. The note was typed, final warning. $5,000 by Friday or we burn it down, with or without you inside. Today was Wednesday, have you told the sheriff? Jack asked, already knowing the answer. Willis? He's useless, Pete put the note away. I've got a shotgun and I'm sleeping here until Friday. If they come, they'll get a welcome they're not expecting. Jack shook his head. That's exactly what they want, an excuse to escalate. If you shoot one of them, even in self-defense, the rest will come after you and your family. So what's your suggestion? Pete demanded. Pay up, run away?
Neither, Jack said.
I think we need to organize. How many business owners have they approached? At least 20, Pete replied. Most are paying. A few closed shop. Only me and the pharmacy are still holding out as far as I know. Jack nodded slowly, a plan forming in his mind. Can you get a message to the others? The ones who are paying too. We need to meet somewhere private. Pete looked skeptical. What good would talking do? Sometimes the best weapon is information, Jack said. And numbers. 1 person standing alone is a target. 20 standing together is a different story. Pete considered this. I could spread the word. Frank's barn outside town might work for a meeting place. His feed store was the first one they hit. Tomorrow night, Jack said. And keep it quiet. No phones, no texts. Word of mouth only. As Jack drove home, his mind raced with possibilities. The Iron Fist gang had made a critical error. They'd chosen a town with at least 1 resident who had been trained to deal with exactly their kind of threat. In his SEAL days, Jack had helped dismantle terrorist cells and drug cartels. A motorcycle gang running a small-town protection racket? They had no idea what was coming, but first he needed to tell Beth. This wasn't just about standing up to bullies anymore. This was about defending their new home. When he pulled into the driveway, he immediately sensed something was wrong. The front door was slightly ajar, and Beth's car was gone. Jack approached cautiously, drawing the pistol he kept under the driver's seat. Inside, the house had been ransacked. Drawers pulled out, furniture overturned. On the living room wall, spray-painted in the same red as the workshop door, was a new message. Next time she'll be home. Cold fury washed over Jack as he dialed Beth's number with shaking fingers. It rang 4 times before she answered. Jack? What's wrong? Where are you? He demanded, relief flooding through him at the sound of her voice. At my sister's place in Billings. Remember? I told you I was going to help with the baby today. I left you a note on the fridge. Jack closed his eyes, steadying himself. Beth, listen carefully. Don't come home. Stay at your sister's. The house was broken into. What? Are you okay? Did they take anything? I'm fine, Jack assured her. And they didn't come for our things. They came to send another message. He stared at the red letters on their wall, but they just made their biggest mistake yet. Jack spent the night cleaning up his ransacked home, fury simmering just below the surface. He'd convinced Beth to stay at her sister's place in Billings for a few more days. Just until I sort this out, he'd told her, not mentioning his plans for the Iron Fist gang. Beth had argued at first, but the photo he sent of their violated home changed her mind. Morning brought a knock at the door. Jack answered with his hand near the small of his back, where his pistol was tucked into his waistband. But it wasn't the bikers, it was Bobby Cooper, the garage owner. Heard what happened, Bobby said, looking uncomfortable on Jack's front porch. Pete Wilson told me you're organizing a meeting tonight. Jack nodded. Frank's barn, 8 o'clock. I'll be there, Bobby promised. But there's something else. He lowered his voice. My nephew works at the gas station on Highway 12. Says the Iron Fist boys have been buying a lot of fuel. Not for their bikes, gas cans. And they asked if he sold kerosene. Jack's eyes narrowed. Pete's store. They're planning to torch it. Looks that way, Bobby agreed. Tomorrow's Friday, their deadline. We need to warn him, already did. But he's still planning to defend his store himself. Bobby shook his head. Man's got courage, but he's gonna get himself killed. After Bobby left, Jack pulled out his phone and called a number he hadn't dialed in months. Hammer? It's Reaper. Jack used his old call sign. I need some help. Tom Hammer Daniels had served with Jack for 10 years. They'd saved each other's lives more times than either could count. Now retired, Hammer ran a security consulting business in Denver, about 6 hours away. Reaper, good to hear from you, brother. What's the situation? Jack explained about the Iron Fist gang, the protection racket, and the escalating threats. Sounds like you've got a serious problem, Hammer said when Jack finished. Local law enforcement? Compromised, Jack replied. Sheriff's either scared or bought off. State police? Take too long to build a case. These guys are planning to burn down a store tomorrow night. Hammer was quiet for a moment. What's your play? I'm organizing the local business owners tonight. Safety in numbers, but I need backup for the immediate threat. You thinking direct action? Hammer asked, his voice carefully neutral. Not the way you mean, Jack assured him. No bloodshed unless absolutely necessary. But we need to stop them before someone gets hurt, gather evidence, and force the state police to take this seriously. I can be there by midnight with gear, Hammer said. Need anyone else? Jack thought about it. Bring Owl if he's available. Mike Owl Turner had been their team's surveillance expert, with almost supernatural patience and observation skills. Roger that. Text me the coordinates for rendezvous. With backup on the way, Jack turned his attention to the meeting that evening. He drove out to Frank's barn early to help set up. The old feed store owner had arranged folding chairs in a rough circle inside the cavernous space. The smell of hay and cattle feed hung in the air. Thanks for doing this, Jack told Frank, a weathered man in his 60s with calloused hands and shrewd eyes. Been waiting for someone to take a stand? Frank replied. These Iron Fist fellows, they're not just criminals, they're cowards. Prey on the weak. Someone needs to show them what happens when they pick the wrong target. By 8 o'clock, the barn was filled with nearly 30 people. More than Jack had expected. Pete Wilson from the hardware store, Bobby Cooper from the garage, Molly from the diner, and many other business owners Jack didn't recognize. They spoke in hushed tones, casting nervous glances toward the door. At 8:15, Jack stepped to the center of the circle. The conversations died away. Thank you all for coming, he began. I know it took courage to be here tonight. Each of you has been threatened or harassed by the Iron Fist gang. Some of you have already paid their so-called protection money. Others have held out. But we're all their targets. A middle-aged woman raised her hand. What can we possibly do? They're violent criminals. We're just regular folks. That's exactly what they're counting on, Jack replied. Your fear, your isolation, each of you thinking you're facing this threat alone. He looked around the circle. But look around. There are 30 of us in this room. How many of them? 15? 20 at most? They have guns, someone called out. And a corrupt sheriff backing them, added another voice. Jack nodded. True, but we have something they don't. Community, information, and after tonight, evidence. He explained what he'd learned about the gang's operations, their headquarters at the warehouse, and their plans for Pete's hardware store. Then he outlined his proposal. We need to document everything. Every threat, every act of vandalism, every sighting of gang members near your businesses. Photos, videos, written statements. We build a case too strong for even Sheriff Willis to ignore. And if he still does nothing? Bobby asked. Then we take it to the state police, Jack said. With 30 witnesses and solid evidence, they'll have to act. That all sounds good for the long run, Pete said, but they're coming for my store tomorrow night. What about that? Jack met his gaze. I have some friends arriving tonight. Former military, like me. We're going to make sure nothing happens to your store. A murmur ran through the group. What are you planning to do? Molly asked, concern in her voice. Nothing illegal, Jack assured her. We'll document their attempt, protect Pete's property, and gather evidence. No violence unless it's self-defense. The discussion continued for another hour. Jack provided each business owner with a simple, secure way to communicate. Prepaid phones that couldn't be traced to them. They agreed to form neighborhood watches, always traveling in groups, and to document every interaction with the gang. As the meeting broke up, Frank approached Jack. You were military, weren't you? Not just any military, Jack nodded slightly. Special operations. Thought so, Frank said. My son served 2 tours with the Rangers. I recognize the bearing. He clapped Jack on the shoulder. These Iron Fist boys have no idea what's coming, do they? No, Jack said quietly. They don't. After the last car pulled away from the barn, Jack drove to a remote spot outside town, an abandoned hunting cabin he'd discovered during his exploration of the area. Right on schedule, a dark SUV with Colorado plates pulled up beside his truck. Hammer stepped out first, 6'3", built like his nickname suggested, with a shaved head and a neatly trimmed beard. Behind him came Owl, smaller and wiry with alert eyes that missed nothing. The three men embraced briefly, the way brothers do after a long separation. "Good to see you, Reaper," Hammer said, using Jack's old call sign. "Wish it were under better circumstances," Jack replied. Owl popped the SUV's trunk, revealing cases of equipment. "Brought the toys you requested. Non-lethal options, surveillance gear, and a few surprises." They spent the next hour reviewing Jack's intelligence on the Iron Fist gang and formulating a plan for the following night. None of them mentioned the countless similar missions they'd run overseas. This wasn't a military operation. This was protecting a community. But the skills were the same. "These guys aren't professionals," Owl observed, looking at Jack's photos of the gang members. "Sloppy security, predictable patterns. They're used to intimidating civilians, not facing organized resistance." "That's their weakness," Jack agreed. "Overconfidence." "What about your wife?" Hammer asked. "She's safe?" "Staying with her sister in Billings," Jack said. "But they've already broken into our house once. I need to end this before she comes home." Hammer nodded. "Then let's do it right. One operation, clean and by the book. We document their crimes, protect the store, and hand everything to the state police." "And if the sheriff shows up?" Owl asked. "We record that too," Jack said grimly. "If he's corrupt, we add it to the evidence." As dawn approached, they finalized their preparations. Jack felt a familiar calm settling over him, the focused readiness that came before action. For the first time since leaving the SEALs, he was using his training for exactly what it was intended: protecting innocent people from those who would harm them. At sunrise, they split up. Owl headed to the hardware store to begin setting up surveillance. Hammer went to rendezvous with some of the business owners who had volunteered to help. Jack drove to the edge of town, parking where he could observe the Iron Fist warehouse. Two gang members stood guard outside, looking bored and smoking cigarettes. Inside, Jack knew they would be preparing for tonight's arson. They thought they were the predators in this situation. They had no idea they had become the prey. Jack's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, another threat from the gang. "Hope your wife enjoys Billings." "We know where she's staying." Cold anger washed through him. They were watching Beth's sister's house. They were escalating beyond Pine Ridge. Jack sent a quick text to Hammer and Owl, adding this new information to their calculus. Then he started his truck and headed back to town. The plan remained the same, but the stakes had just gotten higher. Tonight, the Iron Fist gang would learn what happened when they messed with the wrong man. Darkness fell over Pine Ridge as Jack positioned himself on the roof of the shoe repair shop across from Pete's hardware store. The night air carried a chill that reminded him of countless surveillance operations in distant mountains. Beside him, Owl adjusted a high-definition camera with night vision capabilities. "Camera 3 online," Owl murmured into his radio. "Northeast corner covered." "Copy that," Hammer's voice crackled back. "I've got eyes on the south entrance and the alley." The hardware store stood dark and seemingly abandoned. Pete had reluctantly agreed to stay away tonight, after Jack convinced him that his presence might lead to violence. "We're not looking for a shootout," Jack had told him. "We need evidence, not bloodshed." Now, 3 former special operators had the building surrounded with cameras covering every angle. Inside, motion sensors would alert them to any entry. 2 local business owners sat in cars at either end of the street, ready to call in additional witnesses if needed. "Movement at the west end of Main Street," Hammer reported. 3 motorcycles moving slow. "Lights off." Jack raised his night vision binoculars. 3 dark shapes glided silently down the empty street, engines barely above idle. They stopped 2 blocks away and the riders dismounted. "I count 3 tangos," Jack said, falling back into military terminology. "Carrying something. Looks like gas cans. Got them on camera," Owl confirmed. Faces visible when they passed under the streetlight. "That's Viper with the snake tattoo, plus 2 others from your photos." The 3 gang members crept toward the hardware store, staying in the shadows. They paused at the corner to check for witnesses, then moved to the back of the building. "They're heading for the loading dock," Jack said. "Hammer, they're coming your way." I see them, Hammer replied quietly. They're picking the lock on the back door. Jack's jaw tightened. Remember, we document everything. No engagement unless they spot us or there's immediate danger to life. Copy that, both men responded. Through his binoculars, Jack watched as the 3 Iron Fist members slipped inside the store. Minutes ticked by in tense silence. They're spreading accelerant, Hammer reported from his position. I can see through the back window. They're dousing the lumber section. Jack checked his watch. Everything was being recorded, time-stamped and automatically uploaded to secure cloud storage. They had the evidence they needed, but he had to let the crime progress far enough to be undeniable. Get ready, he told his teammates. We move when they try to light it. 5 more minutes passed. Then Owl's voice urgent. They're coming out the front door. One has a lighter in hand. Jack watched as Viper flicked a lighter, the small flame illuminating his face in the darkness. This was the moment. Execute, Jack ordered. Instantly, the night erupted with blinding light as powerful floodlights mounted on surrounding buildings activated. The 3 gang members froze, suddenly exposed in the glare. Pine Ridge Sheriff's Department, boomed a voice through a megaphone. Bobby Cooper playing his part perfectly.
Drop the lighter and put your hands up.
The gang members panicked. One bolted immediately, running straight into Hammer, who stepped from the shadows and took him down with a swift leg sweep. Viper threw the lighter away and raised his hands, blinking in the harsh light. The 3rd man reached into his jacket. Jack was moving before he consciously registered the threat, leaping from his position and landing behind the man as he pulled out a pistol. One quick strike to the wrist and the weapon clattered to the ground. A second later, the gang member was face down on the pavement, Jack's knee in his back. Stay down, Jack growled, securing the man's hands with zip ties. What the hell? Viper was shouting. You're not cops! You can't do this. Owl emerged from his position, still filming everything. No, we're not cops. We're concerned citizens documenting a crime in progress, and you're on camera planning to burn down this building. In less than 2 minutes, all 3 gang members were secured. Jack gathered their weapons and the gas cans as evidence, while Hammer called the real police, not Sheriff Willis, but the state police office from the next county over. Now comes the hard part, Jack told his friends. Keeping these 3 contained until legitimate law enforcement arrives. As if on cue, a police siren wailed in the distance. But it was coming from the wrong direction, from inside town, not the highway where the state police would approach. Looks like the sheriff got wind of our operation, Hammer said grimly. Sheriff Willis's cruiser screeched to a halt in front of the hardware store. He stepped out, hand on his holstered weapon, taking in the scene with narrowed eyes. What the hell is going on here? He demanded. Jack stepped forward. Evening, Sheriff. We've caught these men in the act of attempting to burn down Pete's hardware store. As you can see, they have gas cans, a lighter, and weapons. He gestured to the evidence neatly arranged on the sidewalk. We've called the state police, who should be here shortly. The sheriff's face darkened. You have no authority to detain anyone. Release these men immediately. Actually, Owl interjected, still filming, citizen's arrest is perfectly legal when witnessing a felony in progress, and we have the whole thing on video, including them pouring gasoline inside the building. Willis's hand tightened on his weapon. Hand over that camera and release these men. That's an order. An interesting order, Sheriff, Jack said calmly, especially considering one of these men was about to commit arson. Almost like you don't want them to face charges. The standoff stretched for long seconds. More vehicles were arriving. Townspeople who had been alerted by the commotion coming to witness what was happening. You don't understand what you're dealing with, Willis hissed, lowering his voice. These men have connections. People will get hurt. People are already getting hurt, Jack replied. Your town is being terrorized while you look the other way. The question is why? The sheriff took a step forward but stopped when Hammer moved to Jack's side. The former SEALs didn't flinch, and Willis seemed to realize he was outnumbered. Not just by the 3 veterans, but by the growing crowd of townspeople watching from a distance. This isn't over, Willis warned, backing toward his cruiser. You've made a big mistake. It's all on camera, Sheriff, Owl called after him. Your response, too. As Willis drove away, Jack turned to Viper, who was watching with a smirk despite his restraints. You think this changes anything? The gang member sneered. Hawk knows where your wife is staying in Billings. One phone call from me and Jack knelt beside him. Let me explain something, he said quietly. While we've been having this little drama here, State troopers are raiding your warehouse. Right now, with a warrant based on evidence we've been gathering all week." The smirk vanished from Viper's face. "And as for your boss," Jack continued, "he's currently surrounded by another team of my friends who served with me in the SEALs. They're explaining to him very clearly what will happen if anyone goes near my wife or any other person in this town." It wasn't entirely true. Jack didn't have enough former teammates to pull off both operations, but the fear that flooded Viper's eyes told him the bluff was working. In the distance, more sirens approached. The state police this time. Jack stood up as 3 patrol cars pulled into view. "It's over," he told the captured gang members. "Your protection racket, your intimidation, all of it. From now on, Pine Ridge is off limits to the Iron Fist." As the state troopers took custody of the 3 would-be arsonists, Captain Richards pulled Jack aside. "You took one hell of a risk," the captain said. "Civilian intervention can complicate prosecutions." "We documented everything by the book," Jack assured him. "Chain of evidence preserved, witnesses ready to testify. And we only intervened when they were about to commit arson." Richards nodded slowly. "We've had our eye on the Iron Fist for months. They've been running operations across 3 counties, but we could never get solid evidence or cooperative witnesses." He looked at the growing crowd of townspeople. "Seems like that's changed." "These people just needed to know they weren't alone," Jack said. As the police cars pulled away with the arrested gang members, the townspeople surged forward. Pete pushed through the crowd, grabbing Jack's hand and pumping it vigorously. "You saved my store," he said, voice thick with emotion. "How can I ever thank you?" "No thanks needed," Jack replied. "But there's still work to do. The Iron Fist won't give up their territory without a fight." Molly from the diner stepped forward. "Well, they're not just fighting you anymore. They're fighting all of us." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. These weren't just scared individuals anymore. They were a community standing together. As the excitement died down and people began to disperse, Jack's phone rang. It was Beth. "Jack, are you okay? I saw on the local news that there was some kind of police action in Pine Ridge." "I'm fine," he assured her. "Things are looking up here, actually. I think it might be safe for you to come home soon." "What happened?" she asked suspiciously. "I'll explain everything when you get back," Jack promised. But the short version is that the Iron Fist gang is going to be busy with legal problems for quite a while. After hanging up, Jack rejoined Hammer and Owl, who were packing up their surveillance equipment. "Good work tonight," he told them. "But this isn't over yet." Hammer nodded grimly. "Hawk is still out there, and now he's going to be angry." "Let him be angry," Jack said. "We'll be ready." As they drove back to their temporary base at the hunting cabin, Jack knew the most dangerous part was still to come. They had struck a blow against the Iron Fist, but the gang's leader remained free, and wounded predators were always the most dangerous. Tomorrow would bring the final confrontation. The morning after the hardware store incident, Pine Ridge buzzed with excitement. News traveled fast in small towns, and by breakfast time everyone had heard how 3 Iron Fist members had been caught trying to burn down Pete's store. The diner was packed as people gathered to share what they'd seen or heard. Jack sat at a corner table with Hammer and Owl, nursing cups of coffee while keeping their voices low. "State police report 7 arrests at the warehouse raid," Hammer said, checking his phone. "They found drugs, illegal weapons, and stolen property." "What about Hawk?" Jack asked, referring to the gang's bearded leader. Owl shook his head. "Not among those arrested. He wasn't at the warehouse when the raid went down." This was the news Jack had been dreading. The Iron Fist had been wounded, but its head remained. And a cornered predator was unpredictable. Molly approached their table with a pot of fresh coffee. "On the house, gentlemen," she said, refilling their cups. "Least I can do after what you did last night." "We appreciate it," Jack replied. "But this isn't over yet. Hawk is still out there." Molly lowered her voice. "Word is Sheriff Willis is gone. Packed up his cruiser before dawn and drove out of town. Left his badge on his desk." The 3 former SEALs exchanged glances. The corrupt sheriff fleeing was good news, but it also suggested he feared what might happen next. Jack's phone buzzed. His heart jumped when he saw it was Beth. "Hey," he answered, stepping outside for privacy. "Everything okay?" "I'm coming home today," Beth said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "I saw the news. The state police arrested those gang members. It's over, right?" Jack hesitated. "Not entirely. Their leader is still— Jack, Beth interrupted. I'm not staying away from my home any longer. I'll be there by noon. After she hung up, Jack rejoined his friends. Beth's coming home today, he told them. We need to end this before she gets here. How do you want to play it? Hammer asked. Hawk will be looking for revenge, Jack reasoned. He's lost most of his gang. His operation is exposed and his criminal enterprise is falling apart. He'll blame me. You think he'll come after you directly? Al asked. Jack nodded. He's the type. Wants to show he's still in control. But he won't come alone. So we set another trap, Hammer suggested. Use you as bait. No, Jack said firmly. Too risky with Beth coming home. We need to find him first. They spent the next hour developing a plan. Owl would use his surveillance skills to locate Hawk. Hammer would coordinate with the state police, ensuring backup was ready when needed. Jack would return home to prepare for Beth's arrival, and for the possibility that Hawk might target his house again. As they were leaving the diner, Bobby Cooper rushed in, his face flushed with urgency. Jack! Just heard from my nephew at the gas station. Hawk was there 20 minutes ago with 4 other bikers. Bought gas and asked for directions to your place. Jack's blood ran cold. They're going to my house now. I'll call the state police, Hammer said, already dialing. No time, Jack replied, sprinting for his truck. They might already be there. Beth could arrive any minute. The drive home was the longest 10 minutes of Jack's life. His mind raced through scenarios, calculating risks and responses. As he rounded the final curve in his driveway, his worst fears were confirmed. 2 motorcycles stood in front of his house. The front door hung open. Jack parked out of sight and approached on foot, moving silently through the trees that bordered his property. Hammer and Owl were right behind him, having followed in Hammer's SUV. 2 outside, at least 2 more inside, Jack whispered, scanning the area. No sign of Beth yet. What's the play? Hammer asked. We take the ones outside quietly, Jack decided. Then deal with whoever's inside. They split up, circling the house from different directions. Jack approached the first biker, who was smoking near the motorcycles, his back turned. One quick move, arm around the throat, pressure on the carotid artery, and the man slumped unconscious without making a sound. Across the yard, Owl did the same to the second lookout. Hammer rejoined them at the side of the house. That's 2 down. How many inside? A crash came from within the house, followed by angry shouting. Where is he? Where does he keep his weapons? Jack recognized Hawk's voice. He peered through a window and saw the bearded leader and 2 other bikers tearing apart his living room. One of them was pouring gasoline on the furniture. They're going to burn it down, Jack whispered. We need to move now. The 3 veterans had done this hundreds of times in combat. Clear a building, neutralize threats, protect civilians. They moved as one unit, entering through different doors simultaneously. Jack went through the back door, keeping low. He spotted one biker in the kitchen and took him down with a swift strike to the back of the knee, followed by a chokehold. The man struggled briefly, then went limp. In the living room, Hawk spun around at the sound of Hammer bursting through the front door. The gang leader pulled a knife, slashing wildly. You! Hawk snarled when he saw Jack enter from the kitchen. You destroyed everything. It's over, Hawk, Jack said calmly. Your gang is done. Most of them are in custody. The rest are running. Nothing's over until I say it is. Hawk lunged forward, knife aimed at Jack's chest. Jack sidestepped the attack, using Hawk's momentum against him. A quick strike to the wrist and the knife clattered to the floor. But Hawk was stronger than he looked. He tackled Jack, sending them both crashing into a table. As they grappled, Jack caught glimpses of his teammates handling the 3rd biker. Hammer had him pinned to the ground while Owl secured his hands. Hawk fought with desperate fury, landing a solid punch to Jack's ribs. Pain flared, but Jack had endured far worse. He trapped Hawk's arm, shifted his weight, and flipped the gang leader onto his stomach, twisting his arm behind his back in a joint lock. Stay down, Jack ordered, increasing pressure until Hawk groaned in pain. It's finished. You think this ends with me? Hawk gasped. We've got chapters in 3 states. They'll come for you. Let them come, Jack replied, securing Hawk's wrists with zip ties. I'll be waiting. As Hammer called the state police, Jack surveyed his ransacked home. Furniture overturned, possessions broken, gasoline soaking into the carpet, but it was still standing. Like the town itself, it could be rebuilt. The sound of tires on gravel made Jack's head snap up. Beth's car was pulling into the driveway. Perfect timing. Owl remarked dryly. Jack rushed outside as Beth stepped from her car, her eyes widening at the scene. Unconscious bikers on the lawn, state police cars arriving with sirens wailing, and Jack himself disheveled and bruised. "Jack!" "What happened? Are you hurt?" He pulled her into a tight embrace. "I'm fine. It's all over now. Really over." Over the next hour, state police officers took statements in custody of the captured Iron Fist members. Captain Richards personally thanked Jack, Hammer, and Owl for their assistance. "We've been after the Iron Fist for years," Richards admitted. "With Hawk in custody and evidence from your surveillance, we can dismantle their entire operation across the state." As the police cars drove away with their prisoners, Hammer clapped Jack on the shoulder. "Just like old times, Reaper. Except we're on home soil. Protecting our own," Jack replied. "Speaking of home," Owl said, "yours is a bit of a mess." Beth, who had been surveying the damage inside, joined them on the porch. "Nothing that can't be fixed," she said with remarkable calm. "The important thing is everyone's safe." Hammer and Owl said their goodbyes, promising to visit under better circumstances next time. As their SUV disappeared down the driveway, Jack and Beth sat on the porch steps, watching the sunset paint the Montana sky in brilliant orange and pink. "You know," Beth said after a while, "when you suggested moving to a small town after you left the service, I pictured a quiet life." Jack chuckled. "This isn't exactly what I had in mind either. But you missed it, didn't you? The action. The purpose," Jack thought about it. "Not the violence," he said finally. "But using my skills to protect people who can't protect themselves? Yeah, I miss that." Beth took his hand. "You know what I realized while I was at my sister's? This town needs someone like you, someone who stands up when others can't or won't." 2 days later, as Jack helped Pete and several other townspeople rebuild shelves in the hardware store, word spread that the state governor had appointed an interim sheriff for Pine Ridge until special elections could be held. "You should run," Pete told Jack as they worked. "You'd have every vote in town," Jack laughed. "I'm not cut out for a badge." "Maybe not," Bobby Cooper agreed, "but you've already been doing the job. Protecting people, standing up to bullies." Over the following weeks, Pine Ridge began to heal. The Iron Fist gang was dismantled across the state, with most members facing serious prison time. Jack and Beth repaired their home, making it stronger than before. At a town meeting in September, Frank from the feed store stood up and addressed the gathered residents. "I move that we establish a community watch program," he announced, "with Jack Reynolds as our head of security." The vote was unanimous. Later, as Jack and Beth walked home under a canopy of stars, she squeezed his hand. "How does it feel to be officially responsible for everyone's safety?" Jack looked around at the peaceful town. Lights glowing in windows, families settling in for the night, businesses secure behind locked doors. A community that had found its courage and stood together against intimidation. "It feels right," he said simply. "This is what I was trained for." Not all battles were fought in distant lands. Sometimes the most important ones happened right at home, defending not a nation but a community, a family, the things that truly mattered. For a former Navy SEAL like Jack Reynolds, that was a mission worth taking on.